All right, we are live. Mike, how you doing?
I'm good, Mike. Thank you very much for having me back. I really appreciate this. I think it's
Oh man, I'm
I,
excited, man.
yeah. Well,
When
the
I got your
story.
email, a week back or whenever it was, I was excited. I was like, oh man, this looks interesting.
Thank you. Well, it's a story that I think your viewers and listeners will really want to go by, and it's only $2.99, so it's a pretty
That's a
inexpensive way
bargain.
to it's a bargain, and it's a great story. And as I will explain later, the only wish I have is that I was able to find out where this particular woman was now, so that I could see how her life turned out. But
Oh yeah, that's actually one of the things I was going to ask you
yeah,
if you were ever in contact with her or.
no. So I have to tell you. So the name of the
She'll
new.
end up seeing one of your interviews. She'll end up seeing one
Yeah,
of
I
your
hope so.
interviews and
I
some
hope
reaching
so.
out.
I hope so. That would
That'd
be
be
great.
awesome. That would be incredible.
Well, let me just start out by telling your viewers and listeners the name of the new ebook, and it's on Amazon. It's available, as I said, for $2.99. Is called The Sculptress, and it's a true story. And the story is about a woman who really was brought up in a wonderful family. Her mother and father, and I don't recall if she had any siblings, but I know her mother and father brought her up to be a good student, which she was, and she went to parochial school for her young life. I think both elementary and secondary school, but I'm not 100% certain about secondary. But she was I wouldn't say a religious person in terms of a religious nut, but
Right.
she had a very strong sense of ethics about her, and it shows in what we're about to talk about in terms of the way that she handled her life. So, and the reason that it touched me, this story touched me, is because of what I just said, and because of what essentially life put her through, and how she came through it, and how she handled it was remarkable to me. Remarkable, and I might as well start at the beginning. Let me tell you how I
Yeah,
got.
let's start it. Yeah, start at the very beginning, Mike.
Yeah. So
Let's say I got a little bit of a head start because you sent me a little behind the scenes, the
yeah,
ebook behind the scenes. But yeah, so these people they know absolutely nothing,
right.
nothing. So we'll start
So
from the beginning.
as you probably hopefully your fans remember, I used to be a prosecutor. I worked for the
Yep.
Brooklyn District Attorney's Office for a total of about 30 years. I spent two different stints there. When I left law school, I worked in the DA's office, and I did about 8 years. And then I left to go to work at the New York City Police Department as an attorney for a couple of years. And then a colleague of mine from the DA's office and also from the police department, we became friends, and we decided to open up our own law practice. And for the next 10 years, he and I practiced law. I was a defense attorney. I did civil cases. I did administrative law cases representing employees of various organizations, city employees, and members of various corporations. And I was also an administrative law judge. I would sit and listen to cases from various agencies, like this Parking Violations Bureau or the Traffic Court. I did those kinds of things for a while. And after 10 years, my partner, who had a political background, he worked in politics a lot. He worked for the then mayor, Ed Koch, the mayor of the city of New York. And he decided at some point that he wanted to go back full time and work in politics. So we kind of split up. We split up. He went he went off and did his political work, and I stayed as a defense attorney for the most part until I got a call from the DA, the new DA, and asked me to come back to the office. And that's how I got back and spent the next 20 plus years in the DA's office. During the time that I was in between, I was packing up my office, putting away my cases, getting them ready to transfer them to other attorneys because I was going back to the DA's office. I received a call from an agency in the city that I was a part of called the 18B panel. And 18B represents the county law, state law, which allows the indigent defendants to have assigned counsel to them if they get into trouble. And so if you didn't have a lot of money or didn't have any money at all, you could apply to this agency to get free counsel. And I was on that panel for a long time. I did a lot of cases. I did a lot of murder cases, and I represented a lot of people. And to me, it was giving back. You know, I didn't make a lot of money from those cases. I spent a lot of time on them and prepared them and did exactly what I did if on a case that was a client paying me. And I was well regarded by the 18B panel, and I was on their homicide panel. I was specifically assigned to homicide cases. And beyond that, they also were giving me cases that had some publicity to them that were difficult clients, that kind of thing. So to me, it was great. I actually felt special. I felt, like someone recognized how well I did as an attorney. So I am in my office one late afternoon, and I was starting to get ready to leave. I started to pack up my cases. It took me a couple of months to put everything together. And I get a call from the 18B panel, and it was someone I knew over there. And they said, Mike, we're going to sign your case. It's very important. It's a very important case. It's an interesting case, but this client needs your help. The woman from 18B said to me that the client is in Kings County Hospital, which in Brooklyn is a major city hospital. It's huge. Mm-hmm. And she's there awaiting arraignment. She's going to be arraigned by a judge who's going to go to the hospital and advise her of the charges against her, and she needs an attorney, and you're going to represent her. I said, okay.
Oh, what year was this, Mike?
Probably like 1990, maybe 1991.
Oh, good gosh, I was a year old. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. You and I are not the same age, Mike. I wish I could go back to where you were, but I can't do that. So I drive out to Kings County Hospital from my office, which was in downtown Brooklyn. At probably 2-3 miles. But it was the end of the day, and people were going home. Traffic was bad, and I said, well, I don't know how long it's going to take for this judge to get out here. It's taken me a while. So I walk into the office I walk into the hospital. I found out what floor she was on. And the nurse points me to this room. And Mike, I walk into the room expecting to see, this angry woman who's, just killed her husband, because that's what I was told she had been charged with. And, and instead I see
a miscarriage of justice is pretty much what you got sitting there.
I see a person laying in the hospital bed. I couldn't see her because she was covered with bandages. Her head was covered. Her face was covered.
I don't even understand how they can make an arrest on something like that, Mike.
I don't either. It's one of the things that
it's one of the laws that makes me sick.
Yeah.
It's why I love Texas and Florida so much, because of their stand your ground laws.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I tell you,
even
crazy.
In New York, Mike, the DA, I told him this. The DA made a mistake. This was
damn right.
She was not to be arrested. So, and I'll explain why. Well, you read it, so you understand. But I walk and I see, and her arms are above the bed clothing, and she's all bandaged. Her hands, her arms, etc. So I'm not going to use her real name. I use the story in the book is completely true. Is completely true, except that I changed her name.
Sure.
So I walk in and I introduce myself and I say, "You, Jenny?" And she says, barely. I could hear her. Yes. So I said to her, what has happened? So she, at that point, the nurse comes in as well and tells me she's been burnt. She's covered because she burnt all of her, everything that you see was covered has been burnt. So I said, the judge is on his way here or her way to do an arraignment. How can we do that? This woman could barely speak. She can't help me understand what's happened to her. So how can I represent her? So as it turns out, the judge or someone must have phoned ahead and stopped the judge from coming. And here's why. Mike, she was so badly burned. Her hands were so badly burnt that the fingerprints were burnt off her fingertips. She couldn't be fingerprinted to be arraigned. And you can't arraign someone unless you know what their criminal record's like, etc. Right. It took months.
I bet you that's a problem that the city doesn't come in contact with too much. A person you're trying to arrest, their fingerprints are so badly, from being abused. You know what I mean? I mean, that's just crazy.
Absolutely. I've never had it, and I've done a lot of cases in my career. And
I was going to say, I'm sure you've seen a lot of shit, but not quite that one.
Yep, absolutely. So to push forward, they couldn't arraign her. So I told her, she gave me as best as she could what had happened, and it still wasn't. She just couldn't explain properly, and I don't blame her because she was in pain. She had these bandages. I'm someone who she absolutely has no idea who I am, So I said, listen, we're gonna let you heal, and when you heal, and your finger, because I was told by one of the doctors that her fingertips will come back, the skin will regenerate, and she will have fingerprints. And when that happens, they will notify the police, and the court can then fingerprint her. Now that took several months, Mike. Several months.
Let me ask you something, Mike. When this all came about, and you're at the hospital that day, and you're finding out the thing that she can't even get arraigned because her fingerprints are singed off. Did you ever try to make a one-on-one meeting with the prosecutor who actually is the one responsible for pressing charges on this poor woman?
Without a doubt.
So did she even sit down with you one-on-one?
Did the prosecutor sit down with me?
Yeah, the person who is
telephone.
The one by telephone.
On the telephone. Yeah, on the telephone.
Wait, was it a he or she or
he? It was a he.
It was a he. So what did he have to say? I mean,
I'll tell you what he had to
specifically for himself.
I'll tell you what
I'm not a big fan of him, in case you haven't noticed.
Okay, I'll tell you what he had to say. He said she's charged with killing her husband. She burnt him to death. That was his retort to me. I said, but are you aware of what the circumstances were? She burnt him. I mean, that was essentially it. It was like a one-track mind, Mike?
Is some of those, and obviously no offense, just like in any profession, there's good and bad just in anything. But do you think some of those DAs that it is just a score sheet to them?
Are there in my life? Have I run into them?
Yeah. Have you met them? Yes,
absolutely.
And is this possibly one of them?
As it turns out, when I went back to the DA's office and I took over the homicide bureau, guess who one of the people who worked for me was? The DA who handled this case. Yeah, and he was a terrific.
Oh, he turned out to be okay.
Yep, straight as an arrow. I mean, no problem. It wasn't him. I believe there must have been pressure from other parts of the office to do this.
That's the other thing too. You never know. Yeah.
Right. He was
you never know who's pushing whose buttons sometimes. You know what I mean?
Precisely. Yeah. So it took me a while to find out what had happened. And when I found out what happened in short, because I don't want to, I want your readers and your viewers to buy the book. So let me just give you a little bit of a rundown. So it turns out that Jenny, as I said, was brought up by a very strict, very ethical, very religious family. And when they moved to Brooklyn, they moved to a section of Brooklyn called Bedford-Stuyvesant, which is a section that at the time was a very high crime rate, had a very high crime rate. time when she moved there, it got progressively worse. And by the time this incident occurred, it was very bad. The city was very bad at that point. There were, in the beginning, when I first went back to the DA's office in '92, there were 2,000 murders in New York City in those days. There were 600, 700, 800.
Had the Colombo Wars going on right there, and
the Colombo Wars had already, they took place before I got back, but that's the early '90s. Yes.
Yeah.
But this was general mayhem in terms of murder, and
was rough.
That was another reason why she was charged with murder, because of what the city was going through at that time. I think there were people in the DA's office who basically said, look, if she's not guilty, a jury will tell us that, that kind of mentality.
Right.
So she went to elementary school, to high school, and she was accepted into college at a college called Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. Now, Pratt Institute is a very prestigious college in New York City, New York State, in the country, actually, for the arts. And yet people like Robert Redford actually is a graduate of Pratt. Robert Mapplethorpe, who is an artist, another one graduated, and others. So she went because she had this artistic bent to her, this artistic leaning. And it turned out that what she kind of was attracted to when she got there was sculpting. And she began to study as the art that she was part of her major was sculpting. And she was very good at it. She was very good at it. Her professors were always praised her. She was just kind of a natural thing to her. And one thing I just want to say before I forget it. Now, keep in mind, she's charged with murder, right? And I tell you, when I walked in the room, I expected this raving lunatic, right?
And this is also her first time ever being arrested too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And when I finally got to know her, you couldn't have a more polite, a more calm, a more law-abiding, ethical person than Jenny. You couldn't have her. It was just unbelievable. So she began studying the sculpting and was very good at it. And she meets Gary, who became her husband, and falls in love with him. And Mike, when I say she fell in love with him, she fell hard in love with him. She was crazy about this guy. So crazy that he talked her out of college and said, I want to start a family soon. So I want you to leave school. You can always go back and let's have kids and let's, get married. And she did it. She left school. She got married. She wound up having 2 sons with him. And the problem was that Gary, although he was to her wonderful and to her very kind and generous and loving, he quickly, after getting married, found problems. And the problems were he couldn't keep a job. He couldn't find a job. And when he got one, he couldn't keep it. So what did he do? He left and joined the army. He figured, I'll go into the service, maybe learn a skill, give me an opportunity to get myself together. And off he went. He went into the army. Now, Jenny was kept up, although she was out of school, she kept up with the art. She kept sculpting. And she kept in touch with her professors, people who, she knew from Pratt. And they were able to judge and to critique her art as she was doing it. And they encouraged her to keep up with it, even though she was not in school anymore. And she did. So she expected her husband to go to boot camp, however long that lasts, and be back, let's say 6 months or so after, and await for his permanent assignment. Instead, earlier than 6 months, he shows up back home. And he told her that he had finished basic training and he was waiting for his his deployment, his orders to go wherever he was going to be deployed. Now, this is post-Vietnam. So he wasn't going into a war, into war, but he was going to probably be somewhere other than the United States. And she accepted it. You know, he was never a liar to her. He took care of her, etc. Until one day when she was home, they got a knock on the door, and they answered the door, and it was the military police. He had deserted. He had deserted. And he came home.
AWOL.
They arrested him. And she told me that she was more upset at the fact that he lied to her about finishing basic training than having to be taken back to the Army. She almost felt, and this is part of her makeup, you know, in terms of that if you do something wrong, that you have to, you know, there are consequences. So she accepted the fact that he was going back, and she was concerned. This is how much she loved him. She was concerned that when he finally was deployed and wherever he was sent, that he would be looked down upon because he was a deserter. And she felt bad for him because of the way that she felt his fellow recruits and fellow soldiers would treat him. You imagine? I mean, that's how much she loved him.
That's a shame.
So it turns out he went to Germany, and he was assigned to Germany. And 2 years later, he comes back home. And this is what she said to me, Mike. The Gary that left was not the Gary who came home.
I believe it.
He was a drunk. He was a junkie. He was a physical abuser, a mental abuser. And for the next couple of decades, every day, he abused Jenny, abused her. One occasion, he broke a piece of furniture in the house, and he beat the hell out of her with the leg of the furniture. He smashed her head against a cinder block wall in their building. That's the kind of abuse that and Jenny
loved. The one day she fights back, she's in handcuffs, you know.
Correct. And that's essentially what happened. She never, Mike, this is the other thing. She told me she never reported him to the police for those early on.
I believe it.
Abusive, because she said, I loved him.
I was actually getting ready to say that myself.
Yeah. I loved him. I didn't want him going to jail until, Mike, it became too much.
Right.
And she finally started to report him to the police, and he was arrested. But the old Jenny kind of reappeared. And when she went to court, she said, I don't want him prosecuted, and dropped the charges. I don't want him prosecuted, drop the charges. I don't want him prosecuted, drop the charges. And did that stop him? Did that make him more feel closer to her because she wouldn't press charges, because she wouldn't put him in jail? The answer is no, Mike. It got worse.
Of course not.
It got worse. He would stay out all night, drinking, doing drugs, hanging out with bad people, and then come home and abuse the shit out of her. That's what she told me. And it was just beyond the pale to me. I couldn't accept it. The day that this all took place, the day of reckoning, was the culmination of years of abuse, years of arrests and charges being dropped. It got so bad, Mike, that she had to send her 2 sons away to live with her relatives in another state because she didn't want them around this abusive household and this abusive behavior. So she broke up her family to protect the 2 boys so that they wouldn't be around to see what their father was doing to her. And I think, honestly, she probably saved their lives, because oftentimes abusers become abusers because of what happened in childhood and what they viewed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct. So the problem that I had, Mike, was I knew and I'll tell you what. Let's get to the point of why I'm involved in the case. So this one particular day, he comes back to the apartment after she threw him out. She finally, I forgot to say this, she finally threw him out of the apartment months or weeks before. That didn't stop him from coming back. And he would come back, knock on the door, beg her to take him back. And there were times she was very candid. She said, I was weak. I loved Gary. And I always figured that maybe this is now the beginning of the end. And maybe now this will be the end of this. And I can talk sense into him, tell him to get help. In fact, she did refer him, and he did go for treatment several times. And every time he came back, he would just revert to that abusive personality. He also, every time he came back, he would bring sort of like a peace offering, a bottle of wine or something. And rather than say no, she again felt, let's have a glass of wine. Maybe I can talk him into becoming the Gary that I knew back that when I married. And it didn't work out. It didn't work out. They would sit there and have a bottle, share a bottle of wine. And invariably, she told me, he would get drunk. And before the end of the bottle, he would start smacking her around and beating her up, and she had to toss him out of the. Think about that life, Mike. Think about having to endure that. It's just an awful thing.
No, that's an awful existence.
So she had thrown him out, and this particular day, he comes to the apartment like he had done other days, and again she made the really bad mistake of letting him in. And I'll tell you how. And she didn't offer any excuse. She said to me, I began to smoke crack before that because I thought that I needed something to take my mind away.
I couldn't believe when I read that part.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, she wanted to basically to anesthetize herself, you know? And she said to me, you know, that day, I'm sure I felt that I was not high, but I felt mellow enough to let him back. I thought maybe I could finally convince him. And she said, you know what? I had a bottle of wine, and I asked him if he wanted to share a drink with me, and he said yes. And they had this terrific conversation, she said. Very calm, very, very polite. Everything was going good until a certain point. He brought up the fact that she had been reporting him to the police. And he said to her, threatened her. He said, if you don't stop reporting me, not I'll stop doing this to you. If you don't stop reporting me, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. That's basically what she said to her. And this time she realized that he was very serious. Now, because of all the other times that he was arrested and went to court, she had been able to get an order of protection. You know what that is? That's a document which the court issues to a victim and says, if the bad guy essentially
kind of like a restraining order of some sort
comes anywhere near you, he can be arrested for just violating this order of protection. Okay. So she had one. And she was able to get away from him that day. She went to the police station with it. And I'm not going to give you the details of what happened in the police station because I really think it's an important part and it's good for the story. To make a long story short, the police don't help her. And she goes back home, walks back home from the...
I tell you, Mike, at this part, I was like gritting my teeth reading this.
And she said to me, I didn't know if he was following me. I didn't know where he was. I know I left him when I left the apartment. I don't think he's in the apartment, but I don't know. So when she gets out of the police station, she checks around her. He's nowhere to be found. So she figured, okay, I'll deal with him if he's in the apartment. I'll have to get help, but that's not what happened. When she gets back to her apartment building, there he is outside the apartment building. And if you probably read this, what he did was he started to beat the crap out of her outside the building. In fact, took her head and smashed it against the building wall, the brick building wall of her apartment building. She was able to make it upstairs, got into the apartment, and there's a whole situation with the door lock. Did you get into that with the story why the door was closed, but she wasn't?
Yeah, she couldn't get no one to come
Right.
Fix her door lock.
The
Yeah,
door lock.
yeah.
So what she was using,
She was barricading the door or something, right?
She was using, the leaf that you would put in a table to make
yes,
it bigger.
Yes.
You
That's
would
right.
jam that under the doorknob, but she got into the apartment, and he was banging on the door. He didn't realize that immediately that the door lock was broken until he got in. He got in too fast for her to get the leaf of the table underneath it.
It's a wonder
I was thinking,
didn't see this.
Well, I'm sorry again. Say it again.
I said it's a wonder an innocent bystander going in and out of their building or something didn't see all this going on.
You know what it's like, Mike?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it's like. Nobody wants to get involved. Nobody wants to get involved.
I know usually that's the case, but just because there's a woman involved, you feel like, someone might jump in.
You would think so. So he's banging on the door. He gets in. And now she realizes that he's going to kill her. He said it, I'm going to kill you. And she knew it. She knew that this time was different. She said to me, she says, I knew that I was dead. And she looked around, and she was looking around for something that she could use to protect herself. The only thing that she could find was a bottle of paint thinner. Her apartment had been painted, and the painters left a bottle of paint thinner. Noxious liquid, and she said, I figured if I tossed it at him or doused him with it, the noxious liquid would get into his nose and he'd leave and not want to stick around. So she takes the bottle and she does that. And he is affected by it, but instead of leaving, it enrages him even more. And now he starts coming after her, and she grabs
Dude, had to have been a total nut.
Yep. She grabs what she described as sort of like a paper bag off the counter, turned on a stove and lit the paper bag. And now as he's coming towards her, she's thrusting it at him to get back, get back, get back. And he's backing up until he finally leaves the apartment, and she thinks success, except that outside the apartment door, she hears screaming, and she knows it's him. She opens the door. He's nowhere to be found. She follows the screams down to the next floor in her apartment building and sees her neighbor's door smashed open. She runs in and she hears him in the bathroom. And when she walks into the bathroom, in her neighbor's bathtub, he's laying there. The shower curtain and he are both engulfed in flames. She's beside herself. She says, oh my God, what has happened? And she starts with her hands to put the fire out, to help him. And she begins to put the fire out with her hands. It's too late. It's too late. He dies. Now, what we find out later on is that when she was doing that thrusting, she must have touched the sweater or coat he had on that was doused. And that pretty much, paint thinner is very, very flammable. And that must have set him afire.
So that's how she got all her burns.
Correct. So
trying to save his life.
Yep. Exactly. So think about this. A person's charged with murder. An intentional murder, does a person who intends to kill someone go up to them and try to save their life? Does it make any sense to you as a layperson? It certainly didn't make any sense to me as a law enforcement official. I couldn't believe that I would have made that decision if I was in the DA's office.
That is one of those situations, Mike, where it is an out and out miscarriage of justice. It's no different than that stupid. And it depends on what state you're in, but it's no different than someone breaking in your house at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I have my 5-year-old son in my home, and I shoot him dead, and I go to jail. You know what I mean?
Right.
It makes no sense to me whatsoever how that could possibly ever happen.
If you had done exactly as you described, Mike, in New York, you're not arrested. Let me tell you, I'll give you an example. In 1977, we had in Brooklyn, the entire city went black in terms of a blackout. Just dead.
What year was this?
1977. And I know this why, because that day was the first, my oldest son's
I think I remember hearing about it.
Yeah, first birthday. I am what's doing on that day. I'm doing homicide duty, which means that if there are homicides with witnesses and defendants, I have to go to precincts and take statements and do things like that. Right.
Right.
So the day passes, the night passes, everything is, I hear about things going on in Brooklyn. I lived in a different borough and there were things going on around me, but not like in Brooklyn. And I get a call that night and I'm told by the desk officer in the DA's office that you're needed in a particular precinct in Brooklyn because there has been a homicide. So I drive in, and Mike, I got to tell you, when I drove to a particular spot in Brooklyn, I realized that I had made a big mistake. I drove in by myself without any police escort, and all hell was breaking loose. There were riots all over the city. There was looting. There was everything. I drove from that spot to the police precinct, not stopping for any lights, not stopping for anyone. And I got to the precinct and parked in the precinct parking lot. And what was the case I was there called to do? A pharmacist had, in the midst of the rioting, when it started, he closed his pharmacy, locked the doors, dropped the gate in front of him, and dropped another gate, and stayed inside the pharmacy because he realized that he needed to be around because it was, the looting was beyond belief.
Oh, yeah, they were breaking in that pharmacy, no time.
Both gates were broken into. Then they got into the door, busted the window on his front door, and here he is by himself in the pharmacy with these maniacs coming in, and he's got a shotgun. And he fires it, and he kills a guy.
Damn right.
I get to the precinct, and I hear that story, and I say, essentially, and I'm going to curse, what the fuck am I doing here?
Exactly.
This is not I can't arrest this man.
Get the cleanup squad and clean him up. Right. And as far as I'm concerned, he should be getting the key to the city.
Totally justified.
Damn
so
right.
I do what I'm supposed to do. I take all kinds of statements, and then I make the call at the end of I was there until like noon, and I tell the cops, no arrest. Now, I think every cop that was there breathed a sigh of relief because nobody wanted to arrest him. Nobody wanted to arrest him. So my point is that if someone is breaking into your house, you don't have to ask any questions, Mike, in New York.
Yeah.
You can take a gun if you have it, and you could shoot them. Now, maybe you'll get arrested if the gun is not licensed for possession of a firearm or misdemeanor. But if you were to take, let's say, a lit paper bag and thrust it at someone to move them out of from breaking into your apartment, and he happens to catch on fire, that is justification. That is self-defense. That woman, Jenny, should not have been arrested, but she was.
Yep.
And to make matters worse, she had killed this person who she loved beyond belief, beyond belief. And I'm going to tell you something. At the trial, the judge asked her this question. The night of the fire, Miss, whatever her last name was, did you still, after all of the years of abuse, did you still love Gary? She started to cry, and she answered this way. And I'm going to read it because I have it right in front of me. She said, "Yes, Your Honor. I will always love him because for me, Gary is not gone. He's here with me always, in here." And she pointed to her chest. To live in the heart of someone left behind is not to die. That was her answer. That's the kind of woman she was. She suffered decades, Mike, of beating.
Decades. Talk about a strong woman.
Yep. So, so this was and I got to tell you, so let me give you a little bit of the legal problem that I had. Number one, I never believed that she should be arrested, as I've explained, but she was. And then she was indicted for murder. So now I had to prepare for a trial.
Now, hold on. Can you explain to me a little bit? So you said she was arrested, then indicted for murder. Isn't an indictment, like I know you heard about the whole P. Diddy indictment going on, so I was reading about that on TV and stuff. But when they send out an indictment, isn't that basically what that is a murder warrant? Or a warrant, rather, not for murder, but whatever for the indictment's for.
Okay, I'll explain to you what it is. In the law, and particularly in New York and in the United States, you can't be tried without an indictment. You can't be tried. You can't just be scooped off the street, charged by the police with murder, and then put on trial. That's against. It goes back to the Magna Carta. You have to have a separate body review the facts and determine whether or not, here it is, reasonable cause to believe a crime was committed and reasonable cause to believe that the person accused is the person who committed that crime. Okay? Reasonable cause, not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But that's what has to be found before an indictment can come down. And once it is, that now allows the state to try this woman for the charges that are in the indictment. Okay, so it's more akin to kind of like a summons. You are now summoned to the court to answer these charges. Okay, so she's indicted, and but before that, I had the problem after the arrest, which was in the hospital. That's why she was in the hospital with handcuffs on her arms that were bandaged to the hospital bed. She had to be arraigned initially on the initial charges. She had to be told what she's being charged with. That's the law. And she has to enter a plea, not guilty or guilty. Now, she couldn't do it. I told you they couldn't do it because of the fingerprints. But when she was able to be fingerprinted, they went, and I was with her, went to the hospital, and she was arraigned on the charges. She was apprised of the charges against her, and she pled not guilty. Now, my concern was whether or not a judge would set bail for her to await trial later on after an indictment. And I did not want Jenny, who was a lovely woman, put into Rikers Island, which is a hellhole.
Yeah.
So I was able to convince the judge, based on her background, based on her family upbringing, based on the facts of the case, to allow her to be released on very low bail. And she was able to get family members and friends to put the bail up, so she was out. So now I had to prepare her. First, she was indicted. Then she was indicted after that. Now, when I had to now prepare her for trial, I had to prepare a defense. And the defense of self-defense was easy conceptually. However, I had this problem, Mike. For years, she had the husband arrested. Each time she would go to the police and then the court and say, I don't want him prosecuted. Therefore, I'm going to take him home.
Yeah.
Next time, same thing. Next time. So in self-defense, you have to prove that she was afraid and she had a reasonable cause to believe that her life was being taken. The first part is easy because she was beaten all the time. But the second part about afraid and fearful that her life was going to be taken was a problem, because a jury could say, well, how fearful could she have been? This is something that happened many, many times before, and she didn't set him on fire. She just said, no, I'll allow him to come home. So that's a problem. Why does a woman who has been beaten, and has her husband arrested time after time after time, allow him to come home? What's her mentality? So I asked around. I had done some self-defense cases before, but I had never done one like this. And as it turns out, I learned about something called the the battered woman syndrome. And it is a subset of PTSD. She was beaten so much that she really didn't understand what was happening to her and was more affected by the fact that she was going to be alone if she let this guy go to jail, and she didn't want that to happen. She was going to lose her husband, and she didn't want that to happen. She may have set a bad example for her kids, and she didn't want that to happen. So she would say, okay, let him come home. Let him come home. Let him come home. So I had to overcome a jury thinking, well, this is the same situation. Why did she now light him on fire? Except she intended to kill him. So I asked my colleagues, asked some people around, and there's a lawyer who was in New York who was an expert in this field. He had been defending women, battered women, women charged with crimes for killing their abusive husbands or boyfriends. And he told me about this defense called the battered woman syndrome. And it is a subset of PTSD. And he told me about a psychologist who was an expert in this field and who I should consult with. And I did. And I told her the entire story. And in getting to her, I describe in the story, getting to her apartment and her office. And I got to tell you that I live in, I don't know if you're familiar with New York, but let's just use my hand as a map.
You know something funny, Mike? I'm born and raised right in Delaware. And I go to Philly all the time for Phillies games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And Jersey. And I've never been in New York City.
Okay. Well, you got to come sometime. And when you do,
I want to just for the pizza, man. I'm half Italian myself.
When you do, we're going to go for pizza. I'll take you to some very good places.
Listen, so let's you think I won't? I'm going to hit you up on that too.
I hope you do. Let's just say that my hand is New York City. So I was in Brooklyn, which is down here, let's say south, right? The office that this doctor had was in Upper Manhattan, which is up here. Okay. Now you might say, well, that doesn't look very far. Believe me, it is. And the only way to get there was with the subway, because you can't park.
How long of a drive is it if you left your house in Brooklyn to go to?
It depends on what time of the day. It would have taken me. I would never leave the city, but it would probably, my guess, it would take me an hour and a half, maybe longer than that to get there. Oh yeah.
You Mike, I lived my whole state in an hour and a half.
Exactly. Listen, when I worked in the DA's office, I lived in Queens, which is an eastern borough of the city, and worked in Brooklyn, which is more western, but a little north. It never took me less than an hour to get in to the office. Never with a car. With the train,
is it because it's that far, or is it just because of traffic?
Traffic. Yeah. Without the traffic, half an hour, 20 minutes I can make it. Okay. And the train, the subway is in that, to go that far on the subway is very long, because you got to stop after stop after stop after stop. Anyway.
Right.
So I have to tell you, I was so worried about whether or not I was going to be able to do the right thing for Jenny. But after I spoke to this doctor, this psychologist, she really restored my faith in terms of my ability to get her and to defend her and to get where I wanted her to be. And she agreed to testify as well. And she did. She testified at the trial. The prosecutor also had an expert.
So you actually wanted her to testify?
Oh, I did. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Right. And I wanted Jenny to testify. I had to prepare her. And I got to tell you, Mike, when I first sent her to meet the doctor, it was not that long after she had gotten out of the jail and after she had been out for a little bit, she was starting to heal. And then the first time I met her, after she had seen the doctor for a pretty good period of time, I almost didn't recognize her. She was dressed well. She carried herself in such a way that you would never think that she was a defendant in a murder case. You'd never think that she had any problems. And when she walked into my office, she was dressed to the nines. But you know what she had on? She had gloves, women's gloves. And I knew immediately that the doctor told her to wear the gloves because I knew that she was self-conscious about the fact that her hands were gnarled because of the, and when she testified in the trial that day, she dressed as if, I said to her, dress as if you're going to church. And I did that knowing that there was a chance that I would be sorry, because another side story. I was doing a case involving two mafia figures, right? A murder case.
Who were the mafia figures?
Two mafia guys. Yeah, they were they were Gambino, I think Gambino associates. They killed a guy who had not muscled, but was selling drugs on their turf. And they killed him. And he was a guy who everybody in the neighborhood loved. Nobody knew that he was a drug dealer, but these guys knew, and they killed him. One of the mafia guys, one of their customers was a guy, and he didn't like them, even though he was a customer. He was a customer because he had no other choice, but he didn't like them. So the detectives found him, and they had confessed to him what they had done to the victim in my case. So he's in my office. His name, I'll never forget him. Jack Seco was his name. And he's sitting there and he's talking to me, tells me everything. And I said, you're terrific. He knew how to answer everything. Everything was great. So I said, listen, you're going to testify now. You're going to testify like in 2 days. He said, so how should I dress? I said, dress the way you go to church. He says, okay, I can do that. So that morning, the morning of his testimony, I'm at my desk. The detective first walks in and he's laughing his ass off. I said, Tommy, what's up? He says, wait. And into my office walks Sika. Mike, he was dressed in a lime green suit.
Looked like Dumb and Dumber.
Right, with a short green jacket, pants that looked like they were painted on, short, white socks, shoes that he could have used to kill cockroaches in a corner. They were that painted. And his hair, he had blonde hair. His hair was sticking up on his head like this with gel. No, I said to myself, I said to him, and I said, what the fuck? He goes, what? Weird. What? I said, I told you to dress the way you go to church. He says, Mike, this is the way I go to church. This is the way I dress when I go to church. What's wrong?
What fucking church do you go to?
To make matters even worse, when he's on the witness stand, we ask him a question. First question, what's your name? You know what he does, Mike? He grabs his crotch, shakes it, and answers, my name is Jack Sika. I thought maybe I was seeing things. Next question. Man. He answers it, grabs his crotch, shaking it. I look over at the jury, and the jury is now ready to bust out laughing. He answered 4 questions, and I finally said to the judge, Your Honor, can we take a break? I need to talk to my witness. We take him outside in the corridor of the courtroom, and he says to me, What happened? What did I do? I said, you're grabbing your cock every time you answer the question and shaking it. What's wrong with you? He goes, I was. I said to him, here's what you're going to do. You're going to grab both arms of the witness stand or the witness chair, and you're not going to let go when you answer the questions. Can you do that? Yeah, and he did, and he was great. He was great, and we convicted both of the wise guys. But so I was when I said to her, dress like you would dress to go to church. I held my breath until the next day when she came in. Mike, she looked like she was going to church. Demure, nice dress, gloves again, and she testified like a superstar. And that answer that I read to you just a few moments ago was the way I believe that had an effect on the judge that you can't even, I couldn't buy it if I asked for it. So the trial ended. I'm not going to get into, I think it's very important if you're going to buy this, your readers are going to, oh, I keep saying readers, if your viewers are going to buy this, that I don't spoil the ending. I don't know if you got this far. Did you get to the trial?
I did not get to the trial and to the
Okay.
very end. So
well, I think you should. I think you should. It was a surprise to me, and I'm not going to say why. And on the day
based on some of the story, I think I know what happens at trial.
Right. So it's
but
to make a very long story shorter, and we're getting close to an hour. When we left the courthouse together after the last day that we were together, she grabbed me and she gave me a hug and she said, "I'll never forget you. You saved my life." And Mike, I've done a lot of things in my life, and I've done on both sides. It's the reason why I wrote and said, maybe I even wrote it to you, that I will never, ever forget this woman. I'll never forget this case. And I wrote this story.
We have to find her, Mike. We have to find her. You guys got to get back in touch.
I would really love to. I've tried. Believe me, I tried. But I got to tell you that during the time I was writing my true crime books, Homicide Is My Business and Crooked Brooklyn, and I always had it in my head that I was going to do this as a short story. I could do it. I didn't. It's not a full book. And when I finally decided to do it, it was in between the Fallen Angel books. I realized that I could self-publish this, and Amazon now calls them ebooks. So
that's why I was confused, Mike, because I'll be honest with you, I've never heard of like an actual ebook like that. So I was a little confused when you had originally sent it to me.
I've got 3 of them. I wrote 2 others before this. One called Hand of the Killer, how a bloody bomb print and a baby's pacifier nailed the killer. That's one that I did.
And this is a true story?
Oh, yeah. We never talked about that one. We can in another time. Yeah. Maybe you'll have me back.
We'll have to get back on and talk about it because I tell you, I love it.
Okay. And another true story called Murder on the Bridge, where
that was with the young woman who got raped,
killed,
right?
Yeah. Killed, strangled.
And then he went back.
Right.
He went back, right? Yeah. The very first time I interviewed you, you touched on that case.
Right.
That was an insane case.
So I'm not trying to beg to come back, but I'd like to come back and talk about Hand of the Killer because I think that it's a great story.
I'd love to have you on.
It's a great story.
I'd love to have. Well, we'll plan for next week if you want.
That's fine with me. And the Sculptress is the woman is really still in my head, Mike. Still in my head in terms of think about this. This is the way I look at it.
Forgive me for not having this up. I want to bring up a picture. Sorry, go ahead. If you see me looking at something, I want to bring up a picture of your ebook while you're talking, but go ahead.
Yeah, please do. I would like you to do that.
Yep. What were you saying, Mike?
When I finished writing it, finished editing it, I gave it to my wife, who is an artist in her own right. She's a fashion designer, an artist, etc. But she's a good reader, and she's attuned to a lot of things. And I gave it to her to read, and she came out of our bedroom where she was reading it, and she was crying. So I knew right then that I had something, that this was a story that touched particularly women. It's really something that I think women will really enjoy reading and understand that there are people out there who understand domestic violence, and people out there who understand that there are women who are put into situations where they feel that there's no place for them to go. There's nowhere for them to turn, but there is. And to me, I was so happy at the end of this case that I was a person who could do what I did in terms of bringing peace to Jenny's life, and that's why I said to you, I'll never forget it. Never forget her.
Oh, I know you won't. And I tell you, and just like she said, Mike, she'll never forget you either. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. Those words mean a lot to me. They really do. They mean a lot.
That is awesome.
I know you got that book cover because I sent it to you.
Yeah, I got it right here, actually. I'm just trying to figure out how to get it on. Let me go back here. Present. Share my screen. Entire screen. So here it is here.
There it is.
Can you see it? Yep.
Yep.
And this is it, The Sculptress, based on true events by Michael Vecchione. And you said you could get this right on Amazon?
Oh, yeah, Amazon. That's where you get it. A story of unrelenting love and abuse. That's and obviously the hand with the fire is and I got to tell you, I mentioned that my wife before. My wife designed this cover. So
see, I was, you know what, Mike? I swear I was looking when you first sent it to me. I said, man, I really like that cover. That's so cool. And then with the burnt hands, you know what I mean? The handle. I mean, that's super cool.
Yep.
She did a good job.
She did a great job. She did a great job. So Michael, again, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike.
I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to coming back. Just give me an idea as to when you want me next week, and we'll do it. And I will talk about. It's called Hand of the Killer. In fact, what I'll do, Mike, is I'll send it to you. Okay, I'll send you the story, and I'll send you the cover, and it's a terrific story, and it's got a little twist. I'll tell you one little.
Please do that. Send me the cover because I won't have to go through like last time. I'll make sure it's all set up in the beginning so I can.
No. I'll send you
it up the right way.
I'll send you the cover. No problem.
Awesome.
And do you want me to send you the story? If not,
if you don't mind. If you don't mind, I'll read it. Yeah, for sure.
So that's it. And I got to tell you that it's a pleasure. I really you're enthusiastic, and your enthusiasm with me and with my work is really
man. I love it. I love it. Like I said, no matter what happened 10 years from now, I'll never forget you either, Mike. You were my very first guy, man. And I love your stories. I could sit and listen to you talk all day. I was talking to family about it not long ago. I said, I could tell you, I could listen to this guy talk all day, man. It's crazy.
Well, just a little preview. The book, Fallen Angel Book 3, will be out in November. So
nice.
When that comes out, that will be then I will ask you to have me back on, and we can talk about it. Okay.
Oh yeah. You don't even have to ask. We already put that one on the books.
Good. Okay.
All right, Mike. I will be in touch with you. I'll send you an email this weekend, and we'll figure out what day and time next week.
Okay. And when this drops, this one, send it to me, and I'll share it on social media.
Absolutely. Okay? I will do. All right.
Thank you, my friend. Take care, buddy.
All right. Have a great day, buddy.
You too. Bye.